Wayfair 515, Albuquerque Center, Roger, climb and maintain 13,000.
Riding down a trail to Albuquerque, saddlebags all filled with beans and...
Welcome to the City on the Edge podcast with your hosts, Nora Hickey, Mike Smith, and Ty Bannerman.
Don't look much like Los Angeles to me.
Hey, welcome back to City on the Edge. I am Ty Bannerman.
I'm Nora Hickey.
You're Nora Hickey. We may or may not be joined by Mike later on, but I do have a special Mike-related surprise a little later on.
Oh. Is he going to jump out of a cake?
No cakes, no jumping out of cakes. But we have a way that you can get the Mike Smith experience for yourself at your own home. So we're calling
God. Who wouldn't want that?
The Mike Smith simulator.
I need that up here in Colorado.
Well, maybe we should we start with that?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to be talking about it's kind of our I feel like we're doing a Scoundrels mini series right now. So as part of our Scoundrels mini series, we're going to talk about this guy Howard Elam, who was a con man in the 70s and 80s here in Albuquerque. But before that, Mike hasn't been on the show for a couple episodes, and I'm not sure if he'll be joining us today, but he did send me 5 audio files of him driving around Albuquerque's International District delivering pizzas.
Delivering pizza.
Yeah, and they're pretty interesting. I mean, not completely interesting, but also like parts of them are really interesting. So I thought what I would do is I'd start this episode off by announcing that we're going to be having those audio files on our Patreon page for $5 a month and up patrons, and they can download them and have the experience of riding along in a car with Mike Smith. And I think it would be best if what you do is you take these audio files and you go down to the International District and you just kind of drive around. And I don't have a route for you. Maybe if I talk to Mike, we can figure out a route that you could take.
Oh, yes. The Mike Smith map.
Yeah, the Mike Smith map. But I think if what you do is you drive, I think the first one starts out around Zuni, and I'm trying to think if there's a landmark. He talks about the First National Bank building. But if you just drive kind of randomly from Zuni and San Mateo east to through the International District, and don't take your life into your hands or anything like that. Don't stop and talk to anybody standing on street corners, but you can listen to this and have a feeling of what it would be like to actually go out and about delivering pizzas with Mike Smith. And I have a brief taste of it. I thought maybe we'd do little brief tastes on future episodes.
Please.
Especially since Mike is kind of MIA at this exact moment. But this is a little taste of what it would be like to deliver pizzas with Mike Smith.
So that was my first delivery of the day a bit ago. I delivered to a woman who I believe with near certainty was the daughter of my high school principal. She spoke to me on the phone in the same condescending kind of now if you had listened to the directions that were given to you, I'm like, lady, you don't know who they were given to, somebody else. Never heard these directions. I got a receipt here with like 5 words on it printed scrambled. Anyway, but pretty sure that was my ex-principal's kid. That's a weird thing that happens working a job like this. She's like, there's a very small town quality to Albuquerque. Delivered to a few people I know. Anyway, but it was weird. I wanted to be like, I blew up your dad's mailbox and got suspended for it and got a taste of approval for rebellious acts that derailed my whole life. So we have a connection. Yeah. I remember when I came back from my 2-week suspension, just everyone in all my classes stood up and cheered me. And, you know, when my wife went to that same school years later, they were still talking about it. So there was like approval and affirmation that was connected to it. It really did cause me a lot of trouble for a while. It was a dangerous thing. Yeah, when people document the 90s, they don't talk about how much rural and semi-rural kids were messing around with dry eyes.
Okay, well, there you go. Let me stop sharing the screen now. So there you
I
go.
don't think I could.
What's
I
that?
couldn't have asked for a better Mike excerpt. Delivering pizzas, and that's what is revealed.
What is revealed when Mike Smith delivers pizzas in Albuquerque? It is the Mike Smith ride-along simulator. I'll be releasing, I think, 1 track a week on the Patreon page. He just emailed them to me without really any indication of what I'm supposed to do with them. So this is what I'm doing with them. And I think for each episode we'll have more Mike Smith anecdotes and snippets from him delivering pizza in the weeks ahead. So make sure you stay tuned in for that.
I really love it.
Yeah, exactly. It's great. Well, Howard Elam.
Yeah, let's talk about the scoundrel.
So I thought we'd start with February 26th, 1986. Do you know the significance of that date?
Is he going to prison?
No, that is when New Mexico state investigators searching his house discovered a hand-dug cave beneath his Northeast Heights home. Inside the cave, they're like looking around with flashlights. They find an unsettling sight. Skulls, human skulls.
Oh my God.
By the time they clear them all out, they have found over 150 skulls in all.
Okay, I got to his other 2 surprising and illegal activities. I had not heard the skull thing. What the heck?
I was surprised at how like underreported the skull thing was. It showed up in a couple of articles. In other states, it was much more sensationalized. And Albuquerque was almost like incidental.
Oh my God. I mean,
So,
that's disturbing.
it is disturbing to just 150 skulls in a basement under a home in Albuquerque's Northeast Heights is terrifying. But I do want to say right off the bat, it's not because he was a serial killer.
Okay.
Avril Howard Elam II was his name. And he was a grave robber. He was a bookseller. And he was a thief. He was
Like
born
a liar in general, it sounds like, as well.
a what?
A liar in general.
A liar. Yeah, definitely a liar. Wild stories coming out of this guy.
Yeah.
I had a hard time figuring out stuff about his early life kind of before he hit the papers. But I found out that he was born in 1937, almost certainly in Icontuchka, Oklahoma, where he's listed as residing in 1940, the 1940 census when he's 2 years old.
Oh.
By 1953, he had moved to Albuquerque. He attended Highland High School just down the street from where I live. And he won second place in 1953 in the state fair for his display of arrowheads and other Indian artifacts. There. See him? Kind of nerdy. Got a wispy hair, sort of awkward looking. I like the bow tie. That's a nice touch. So let's see. At some point during his time in New Mexico, he began to leverage his interest in Native American artifacts into a business. In the 1960s, he established himself in a small shack near Chaco Canyon, where he gave archaeological tours to out-of-towners. And this
Wow.
Yeah. And it's long before this was Chaco Canyon was a national historic monument. And then he began buying and selling books at various stores in New Mexico and via mail to and from more far-flung places. He got married, then divorced, and then by 1964, he was married to his second wife, Linda Kay.
Okay.
All right, so that's pretty much all I know about his early days. So in 1972, UNM librarians find something shocking. Did you get into this?
Yes. And this was the first notice I found of him, of basically that well, yes, not him yet, but back over at UNM libraries, there's a ton of missing documents.
Thousands.
3,000? Is that what was there a number?
I saw different numbers. I had a hard time kind of tracking it down, making sense of it. But definitely thousands. 3,000 sounds about right.
I found the exact three in the New York Times article I was reading, which I was surprised I didn't find. Yeah, anyway, the coverage outside of New Mexico is interesting.
Yeah.
They state it as 3,934 irreplaceable documents.
Yeah, not just books, but these are documents from Zimmerman Library's 9th stack, which is on the 9th floor of the big tower at Zimmerman. And at that point, it was devoted to just unique and irreplaceable, like you said, priceless papers from New Mexico's history.
Right.
A student requested a document from the 9th floor. They went, they couldn't find it, and they found, in fact, a different document in its place, because what had happened was that the thief, in order to cover up their tracks, basically shuffled the papers all around.
Oh.
And
so he was trying to hide his trail.
Right. Hide his tracks that way, thinking that, if they just a cursory view of the boxes or whatever would show that there was something in them. But it would take a closer examination to figure out that it was something specific, that the document that was supposed to be there was gone. So the librarians realize something hinky has gone on, and they start examining other documents in the same room, and they find that thousands of these documents have had the same thing happen to them. Entire collections are gone. There
Great.
are. Yeah. What did you notice?
Old manuscripts, private letters, entire collections, as you said, on papers on Indian affairs.
Yeah.
Proclamations, New Mexico territorial and state governors, political pamphlets, and Civil War maps.
Yeah, like original proclamations from like the territorial governor of New Mexico under Spanish rule in 1737, that kind of thing. Like the original documents from that time period. Obviously, a devastating loss. So the school contacts the police and the FBI. But it's not until the Albuquerque Journal publishes a story about the theft in November, so 3 months after the theft is first noticed, that they get their first solid lead. An anonymous caller points the finger at Arvil Howard Elam II. The police arrive at his house with a search warrant, and sure enough, they find a bunch of these documents. Yeah. What were you going to say?
Oh, I was going to talk a little bit about the how they found out it was him.
Yeah, go ahead.
That Elam had sold some of the papers in exchange for a weapon. And a tipster, according to the article I found, knew that this local gunsmith had these documents in their possession. And then the police visited this gunsmith, and he did have about 800 papers, which the gunsmith stated he had obtained from a Julius Feinberg in exchange for some weapons and cash. Yeah. And then Julius Feinberg turns out to be Howard Elam.
Right. He uses pseudonyms a lot. Right. But when the cops arrive at his house and find all the documents, they question him. And this is the funniest thing to me. He he tells them this crazy story saying that he had been forced at gunpoint to purchase the documents by a state legislator named Quintana, who had contracted with professional cat burglars to steal the documents from the library's ninth floor. And they used grappling hooks to scale the building and break inside, like from an episode of the 1960s Batman.
Oh my God.
Later during the trial, the detective points out that there were no signs of break-ins on the ninth floor, and there were no state legislators named Quintana. All right, so the UNM librarians, though, had a different explanation, one rooted in fact, as to what had happened. They realized that during the time window they had pinpointed for the document's theft, the husband and wife, who gave their names as Mr. and Mrs. B. Ilfeld, had arrived at UNM asking to see documents related to their ancestor, Charles Ilfeld, a man who had owned a general goods store in 19th century Albuquerque. Those documents were under lock and key in the ninth stack. The librarian said that they wouldn't normally have allowed two outsiders to have access, but seeing as the Ilfelds were relatives of someone who had their documents there, they made an exception for them. The couple went into the stacks for a while, then returned, and the librarian noticed that Mrs. Ilfeld now looked approximately 9 months pregnant, where the librarian had not noticed her pregnancy when the woman went up.
Well, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Which
what? This is like a cartoon or something.
It is. And you know, there's a lot of like unanswered questions. Like the librarian just didn't say anything. I guess it's rude to say, hey, you look like you're pregnant now, and you didn't look like you were pregnant before. And also 3,000 documents under her shirt seems like a large amount for one person to stuff in their clothing. Yeah. So I wonder if this is something that had happened multiple times, or if they had used
right, a few trips there and back.
Yeah, or used different pseudonyms at different times.
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead.
It's what a story. It's not even over.
No, we're not even at the halfway part yet. So a jury agreed that the Ilfelds were in fact Arvil, Howard Elam, and his wife Linda, and sentenced Arvil to 2 to 10 years for receiving stolen property. Linda, however, was not charged or sentenced. Arvil appealed, and the judge granted him a $5,000 bond. So he bailed himself out during the time when he was appealing. But 1 month later, in May of 1973, Howard and Linda were back in court, this time charged with an attempted robbery and assault against a garage owner. Apparently what happened was Linda Elam ran into the guy's garage and grabbed a toolbox, attempted to escape with it. The garage owner grabbed her by the hand, and then Howard showed up with his gun and pointed at the guy and demanded that he release her. The Elams pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity.
Wait, to this attacking the
attacking the
insanity.
The judge rejected the plea, and Elam wound up going to state prison. Weirdly enough, not Linda, as far as I can tell. As far as I can tell, she was never charged for any of this stuff, despite the fact that she was clearly an accessory to the book theft, and then she was the one who grabbed the toolbox.
Wow.
But she didn't go. So he wound up going to state prison. But in 1975, Linda Elam, became ill, and Governor Tony Apodaca granted Howard a conditional pardon based on that hardship.
Wow.
And this is where it gets wild, right?
Yes.
Because, okay, so you figure after having gone through a situation like this, you think maybe maybe Howard would change his ways,
Right.
and he did change his con. So in 1980, Howard Elam, out of jail for 5 years, begins to promote his latest business venture, which he called the New Mexico Museum Supply and Exploration Company.
Is this when he takes people on expeditions to go in search of
Yes.
missing?
Yeah, kind of building off his earlier experience at Chaco Canyon, maybe.
Yeah.
Taking people out into the New Mexico wilds to search for treasure.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
His modus operandi was to befriend potential clients at church, often the Hoffmantown Baptist Church, and tell them stories about how successful he'd been hunting for treasures in various locations in New Mexico. Once he'd piqued their interest, he would invite them to come with him on an expedition. And using maps he said he'd acquired through his research, and in at least one case, using directions gleaned from tracing the path of constellations, he and his mark would find their spot and search, and lo and behold, there was treasure there. Gold crosses, rune-carved rocks, and even human remains all proved that the spot was legit.
And I read some Confederate canyons.
Yeah, Confederate cannons, right? Yeah, we'll get to that. There was Civil War.
Yes.
Civil War relics was one of his areas, and Mike actually wrote about that for one of his My Strange New Mexico columns, which is why I was really hoping he'd be joining us today to talk about his research. I'll have to maybe I can just play snippets from his audio files in place of him, and we could maybe construct a dialogue.
Responding to various.
Yeah. Well, anyway, his victims were now like amazed at the treasures that had been uncovered, and they were overwhelmed by Elam's generosity because he would give them some of the valuable goods. So of course they leaped at the opportunity to help fund the next expedition in exchange for a share of the treasures.
Right. He's clearly knows what he's doing.
Yes. But strangely, that next expedition didn't turn up nearly the dazzling finds that the first one did.
Oh my God.
But Elam had another map and another site in mind. And of course, not every trip was going to pan out, right? But maybe the next big find was right around the corner. And if the victim ran out of money, then Elam would go to his next church service and start spinning his tales again.
I mean, what, like the gall, the confidence, the
confidence. Is
confidence.
That what a confidence man, a con man? That probably refers to getting someone in your confidence, right?
Yeah.
But maybe it also refers to just being really confident.
Yeah.
Which it seems like he was really confident because he was able to keep this up for 6 years.
Wow.
But in 1986, 5 of his victims got together and shared some notes, and they realized just how similar their experiences were.
Mm.
Each one followed the same steps: an initial dazzling find, followed by a pitch to fund the next expedition, and then diminishing returns until the victim was no longer willing or able to pay. All 5 of them had lost money in these ventures. One guy lost only $1,500, but another one lost $35,000.
Oh, wow.
At this point, they knew for a fact that they'd been conned, and they complained to New Mexico's Attorney General.
Wow.
And that's when this raid, February 25th, 1986, Elam's home is once again raided by police. This time, they find a shocking array of relics, some real and probably pilfered from New Mexico's archaeological sites, Native American pots, Spanish santos, and the like, and many fake.
Wow.
And they found molds to create golden crosses in the shape of Spanish artifacts. And they found
Oh, no, just because I know he's like in and out of prison and doing this stuff. Remind me what year this was at.
This is 86.
This is 86. Okay.
Yeah. So they also find the metal that he used to make the purported gold artifacts, and it's an alloy that looks like gold but is in fact, pretty much worthless. They
Wow.
find more documents, including many that had disappeared from UNM's collections in the 70s, but had not been recovered after his 1973 conviction.
Can I tell one thing I found?
Yeah, go ahead.
That I thought, is this evidence of him scamming in academia, or just looking around for Googling his name, searching it. The Indiana University Museum in Bloomington has this report, the 6th annual report from that covers a period, I believe, from July 1st, 1969 to June 30th, 1970. And it's this report prepared to show that what the role of the museum is, what they acquired that year, using what money. And there's 4 entries in acquisitions during current year, and it explains with a grant of that's something different, but basically it's a part of this acquisition, with money. And there's 4 entries for Howard Elam.
It seems at least possible to me that, and given what we know about Howard Elam, it seems possible that he might have stolen them from somewhere. Unauthorized archaeological digs, that was a big thing he was into.
Right. Because that was a pretty good, there's a lot of items in that 1 year.
Right. Yeah. And I don't think he had any qualms about any of this stuff.
Because it doesn't sound like he did.
So in February of 1986, this is when during this raid, that's when they find a hidden trap door in his bedroom. They open it up, and there's a series of hand-dug caves underneath, where they find the remains of over 150 human beings that analysis shows were dug up from burial grounds near Native American ruins in the state.
What?
Yeah. And
that's terrible.
Oh, it's unconscionable now. And I mean, like I said, I couldn't believe how underreported this was in the local press. It gets a headline mention in, I think, a Utah newspaper. It's like 150 skulls found under house in New Mexico. You can't help but wonder, like, if these were bodies that he dug up from Fairview Cemetery, would it have been a bigger deal versus, from the Native American grave sites?
I mean, I think you should write an article on this.
It's unconscionable, right?
I
Like
mean, that's disturbing. That's wrong.
Mhm.
That's, you know,
I think, there was kind of a free for all period in New Mexico
yeah,
in terms of getting keepsakes from ruins and so forth. So maybe it was bound up in that attitude, like, oh, it's just the remains of the Anasazi, not real people or whatever.
right. Right. And there's a whole, and it is interesting, and we've referenced it before, and I know we'll do episodes on it, but the anthropology, at UNM in New Mexico was both in, this like space of the field was growing, and there was also such terrible things happening as well. Yeah.
Right. Frank Hibben was, I mean, he's the symbol of that to me. Just he embodied like the Indiana Jones archetype, and then his methods were, if not outright fraudulent, they were certainly like unconcerned with any niceties of treating the inhabitants of the area with respect as to their ancestors. I think we're going to talk about the Decalogue Stone in a future episode, as well as Pueblo Mound, which is a pottery, so did I say a potter? It's called Pottery Mound, and it's a ruined pueblo near the Decalogue Stone, which Hibben, in order to satisfy a crazy theory he had, he drove a bulldozer right through the middle of this ancient, huge archaeological site and just destroyed so much evidence there because he was looking for a ziggurat.
Well, can I, along those lines and back to Howard? I didn't. I did one last search of him connected with Indiana University, and I think he fabricated something and gave it to them, because listen to this. And this is from a different. This is from 1969, June 1st, 1969 to September, in which it sounds like they're cataloging their gifts, what they've acquired. And one entry, number 8, collection of objects worn by members of the Diablo cult, Diablo cult in New Mexico, donated by Mr. Howard Elam. And I've found nothing on the Diablo cult except for this in New Mexico. Like when you search Diablo cult in quotes in New Mexico, did he just pull one over Indiana University Museum? Like,
wild. I don't know. I've never heard of the Diablo cult. That is wow. Okay, well we'll have to learn about that, and either we'll have an episode on the Diablo cult in New Mexico, or maybe we'll have an episode on the University of Indiana's gullibility.
Because there's a ton of New Mexico artifacts in these pages. It's interesting.
Yeah. Weird. Okay, maybe that's an earlier satanic panic.
Yeah.
We'll have to get back to that. Well, one thing I know that he did use these skulls for, and other skeletal remains, was he planted them at these sites where he would take people on his fake treasure hunts to make it like kind of a more believable location.
Oh my God.
Make them look like they were, if it was a Civil War site, he would have, indications that these skeletons were from Civil War soldiers, that kind of thing. So
I'm all nearly speechless at the lengths he's going to.
Yeah. And how does one come up with an idea like this? Do you acquire the 150 skulls first, and then you're like, I know what I can use these for?
I mean, seriously.
So this time when he's arrested, he doesn't offer any far-fetched stories about political cabals forcing him to acquire relics at gunpoint. Instead, his defense rests on asserting that there's no paper trail to indicate that the 5 victims ever paid him anything. But the jury did not find that defense compelling, and they found him guilty of 9 counts of fraud and 1 of tax evasion. He was sentenced to 15 years. The judge had hoped to compel Elam to pay back his victims, even offering him reduced time if he did so, but he didn't. And even if he had, the damage done to New Mexico's like archaeological sites through his activities are beyond a price point. As you pointed out, the grave robbing of the ancestors of New Mexico's native population. I mean, that's a cultural spirit. That's maybe even a human crime, a human rights crime or something.
Right. I'm like, is that it's such a violation. My God. Yeah.
It's certainly unforgivable. And we know that he destroyed sites through his activities and stole remains from some of New Mexico's most important sites, including Chaco Canyon, during his 1960s stay there. And as an independent tour guide, like you mentioned, the cannons. What did you find out about the cannons?
I found that, and I'm not quite sure of the timeline, but at some point, so there's this missing legitimate Civil War Confederate cannon. You know, and so this article I found, which I believed maybe appeared in the El Defensor Chieftain. I don't know what newspaper that's from, but it's tracing this missing canyon. Cannon, sorry.
I don't know. That's hilarious that you keep saying it, canyon.
I just don't like violence, so no. But so you know, in the 1960s, a local history buff in Socorro. Oh, this must be in Socorro. Herbert Ross has the cannon, and then it disappears in the late 1970s. And so, according to this newspaper article, the cannon was stolen by an Albuquerque man named, you'll never guess,
Howard Elam. Yeah.
Who had just gotten out of prison for stealing historical documents from the UNM library. He used the stolen barrel as a mold to make fake cannons, which he planted out in the desert near the Ladrones.
Ladrones Peak, which we talked about at a previous episode, which of course means thief. Ladrone is thief. How appropriate.
Yes, it's all connected. And essentially he scammed investors into financing expeditions to find the missing Confederate cannons. And sure enough, now and again, the expedition would find one. The scam went on for several years, milking people for thousands of dollars.
And that sucks that people got bilked out of thousands of dollars. I do want to say that, but it just but he also, like, his destruction was something that's never going to be repaired, you know?
I feel like these articles aren't, or the one, I mean, from what I'm hearing, they're almost not, where's the attention? Just like you said, the destruction, the violation, the erasure, the changing, it all in service of getting money, it sounds like. And I'm sure he got off on it in some way. He sounds a little pathological, sociopathical. I don't know what it would be, but he's clearly really into these schemes.
Yeah, right. Like this wasn't just an act of desperation that was like a one-off,
right?
Robbing a bank or something. Like, these are elaborate. They hinge on duping people over and over again. Yeah, this is not something like, you don't do this unless there's something wrong with the way you think about other human beings and yourself.
Yeah.
And then, you know, a bunch of the documents that he stole from UNM have never been found still. So those are lost to historians forever now.
And thinking of the fabrication, you know, even this little mention of the Diablo cult, like, what if people in Indiana were like, this is what the Diablo cult wore in New Mexico? I don't know. There's just so many reverberations.
Right. And I can't help but draw a line back to Hibben and his promotion of Sandia Man and how
Yeah.
that caused archaeology and anthropology to go down this dead end for a while, where textbooks were printed with with information on Sandia Man that was bogus, you know.
Oh, yeah.
So
Albuquerque was a real
epicenter.
spot for that. Yeah.
Now, again, I don't know, you know, I imagine obviously there's crime and fraud everywhere, but these things do definitely seem very peculiarly Albuquerque / New Mexican. The forms that they've taken.
Yeah.
All right, so he is still alive, Howard Elam.
Yeah. Where is he now?
So he served his 15 years. He got released. He and Linda, who participated in a couple of these schemes, they did get divorced in 1995, and he remarried. I found one mention of him in the year 2000. The Meteorological Bulletin number 84 reported that he discovered a 24-gram meteorite to the east of Albuquerque.
I don't believe it.
Yeah, I know, right? Like I wouldn't buy it from him, guys, or go on any expeditions. But overall, he seems to have led a pretty quiet life recently. And like many retirees, he even has an eBay store where he enjoys 100% positive feedback rating. And his specialty is antiques, including ancient Native American artifacts. Bum, bum, bum. He's still out there.
God. That's that's so fitting. It's almost sickening.
Yeah. Yeah, when I saw his eBay page and there was like ancient Anasazi shell necklace. It was like,
Oh my God.
dude, there is no way that's legit.
Oh my God.
Like either he faked it or he came upon it through less than legal means would be my guess. Allegedly he did that. I'm alleging that he may have done that.
Yes.
Just in case I can't imagine he would come after us. I found his phone number. What about calling him?
Call him?
Yeah, I was like, well, it'd be interesting to talk to him about his side of the story. But then I was like, no. No, I don't think that would be a good move.
I don't know. I know. I guess I'm curious, but I'm not curious enough.
Yeah, exactly. Like, so all these crimes that you committed, did you?
Yeah, tell us more.
No, it was Santa Fe State Representative Quintana who held me at gunpoint and forced me to take people out in the desert and dig up treasure. Yeah, his phone number's out there.
His eBay page is out there. It sounds
eBay
like.
page, you can find it. I'm not going to say what it is on the air. I don't want people bothering him, but unless you're connected with the, I don't know, Bureau of Antiquities or something, if that's even a real thing. But yeah, so his phone number, a thing that amazes me forever, always about older newspapers, is how they'll just straight up print the address of the person they're talking about next to their name over and over again, which, you know, now I know that I live very close to his first home, which is approximately 3 blocks away. I could find his home where he committed, where he had the hand dug caves under the floorboards. It'd be interesting to knock on that person's door and find out what they think of it. Yeah. So that's Howard Elam.
Wow. It's just the as we said, the it really starts off with a bang with stealing these documents, but then it gets worse, I feel, with the bodies, for me, the burial sites that have been
Really.
Totally.
And something that wouldn't stand if it were bodies from his own culture, you know?
Right. Yeah. And yeah,
I just feel like the outrage would be much more turned up in those 1980s newspapers.
yes.
Now, if he did it now, I feel like that people would be much more outraged by it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I do feel like there's a lot more conscientiousness about, like, these aren't the remains of the disappeared Anasazi that, you know, used mysterious technology to build their, you know, their multi-story dwellings. These are actually the ancestors of people who still live in that area and still consider that their, you know, they consider that like well, it is their it's their culture, it's their people, it's their family. And I do think people are more conscientious about that. I mean, I remember I would go with my mother to ruins like at Sankowi up in the Hames Mountains and walk with her, and we would just pick up pot shards, you know.
Yeah.
Put them in your pocket because they're cool things to find.
Yeah.
You know, and I wouldn't do that now. I don't do that now.
Right.
That's not an okay thing to do.
I agree. There's that idea of, oh, this is for me to explore and take back with me. And yeah,
look at this cool pot shard.
Yeah.
It's got black marks on it. You can picture the pot, you know. But just the thinking, like I my own thinking about it has changed.
Yeah, same with mine. And honestly, being in New Mexico and Albuquerque, I think as well, made me think differently of it. And seeing, and with the podcast, and also we're seeing these histories and stories of the people who were first there, you know, native people, these white archaeologists and anthropologists, and how you know, how artifacts are displayed and found and all that. Yeah.
Right. Forrest Fenn.
I was thinking of him a little bit.
We should do a real in-depth episode on him and his treasure at some point. We've talked about it before, but I don't think we haven't never delved into it and his history, his rather controversial history in New Mexico.
Yeah. Right. Because there's controversial is a good word. I was trying to think of because he's not a scammer per se, right? But there's some...
No, he was never a con man.
Yeah.
I think what he did was what we know what he did is he owned land that had a pueblo on it. I don't know if you can hear my daughter scream every once in a while. Did you hear my daughter scream?
Joyful. Yeah, I heard some scream.
Yeah, it's joyful. I don't know what it is about. It doesn't sound like she's got her hand stuck in the garbage disposal, so she's probably okay. But that's what that is in the background. One of these days we'll have a real podcast studio.
Yeah, I'll still have to zoom in, sadly.
We'll move you out here.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. Well, okay. I mean, let's close out the episode. All right. Thanks for joining me, Nora.
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
Thanks, listeners.
Wow. I'm sorry to miss Mike out there for the idea. This was Mike's idea.
I know. I don't know.
Join us.
Yeah. He's been a bit MIA lately, but we do have, as a reminder, the Mike Smith Ride Along Simulator will be available for your listening pleasure on Patreon for $5 and up. And to be clear, these will be unedited. Mike Smith.
That's oh yes.
We have at least 2 hours of so I'm sure people are right now. They're getting they're navigating over to patreon.com/City on the Edge podcast and signing up right now because of this amazing offer.
As they should.
Good
should. Voice, everyone. And thanks for listening.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of City on the Edge. If you enjoyed our show, tell your friends, like and share our stuff on social media, and check out our YouTube channel by searching for City on the Edge Albuquerque. This episode has been made possible by our supporters on Patreon, aka the coolest people on the planet. To join them in their support of our show and get exclusive access to content, t-shirts, and swag, go to patreon.com/cityontheedge and sign up for one of the tiers starting as low as $1 a month. This has been a City on the Edge production.